all across America and around the world. This is Veterans Radio. This is Veterans Radio.
Good day. I'm Jim Fausone. I'm the officer of the deck today here on Veterans Radio, and thanks for joining us. We've got some interesting stories for you. We always want to remind you you can find more about Veterans Radio at its Facebook site or at the web, veteransradio.org, where we're on the web 24/7. You can find a lot of our podcasts there as well. We post new ones every Tuesday, so you can get a new story, a new interview, something you didn't know before by going to veteransradio.org. And before we get started, we want to thank our sponsors. First up, we want to thank Legal Help for Veterans. Legal Help for Veterans fights for veterans' disability rights all across the nation. You can reach them at 800-693-4800 or on the web at legalhelpforveterans.com. We just want to remind you that Veterans Radio podcasts are available on all your favorite streaming platforms, including RSS.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Rees Across America Radio. So wherever you are, you can find us, whether it's on your mobile phone or your computer or your laptop, your tablet. But listen in to Veterans Radio Podcasts. We post something new every week, and you're going to find it informative. Today we've got two interesting stories to bring to you. One is about a Medal of Honor recipient, and we're focusing on Medal of Honor recipients as we come into the Medal of Honor Society's annual convention this year being held in Detroit at the end of September and the beginning of October. Great time to focus on these men who did really epic things, so you'll hear that story. And then we're going to focus on something I thought I'd never talk about on the air, low testosterone. Yes, Secretary Pete Hegseth has made this a big deal. He wants our warfighters at their top lethality, his term, not mine. And so he's mandating, if you will, testosterone testing and offering testosterone therapy for those with over 30 with low T. So we have a discussion with a MD about that. It's kind of controversial if you've been watching the news. So enjoy. We get a chance to talk to a recent Medal of Honor recipient, Command Sgt. Major Terry P. Richardson, U.S. Army. Also spent 30 years in the Michigan Army National Guard. He received the Medal of Honor when serving as a platoon leader with Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 28th Infantry Regiment, 1st Infantry Division in Vietnam. His actions saved the lives of 85 fellow soldiers on September 14th, 1968, near Loc Ninh, Vietnam. Initially, Richardson was assigned as the squad leader for the 1st Platoon, but then his radio telephone operator was killed in action during a clearing operation on Highway 13. Richardson moved into the position of platoon leader. During a reconnaissance mission between Loc Ninh and the Cambodian border on September 14th, his unit was engaged by intense automatic weapons and small arms fire from a well-entrenched North Vietnamese Army battalion. Richardson maneuvered through a hail of hostile rounds and deployed his men into defensive positions while directing their suppressive fire. During that attack, he dragged 3 wounded soldiers back to safety. It was only then that he realized that the platoon would be overrun as it was surrounded. So to avoid being overrun, it would require a tactical airstrike. Richardson made his way uphill 222 undetected to call in tactical airstrikes from a shallow irrigation ditch with only rubber trees for cover. At that point, he also was shot by a sniper in the leg. From that elevated position, he realized the enemy force was a large regimental base complex of the 7th North Vietnamese Army Division. He was then speaking on the radio directly to the pilots and began calling in airstrikes. This continued for him guiding these pilots for 7 hours, calling in approximately 32 airstrikes until the enemy ultimately retreated. His actions are credited for saving 85 lives. When we get a chance to talk to Command Sergeant Major Richardson, we don't talk so much about this battle. Most of the Medal of Honor recipients don't want to really relive that, but instead we talk about his life. We talk about post-service and going back into the National Guard. So I think you're going to find this interview very interesting of a man who the country has now recognized through the award of the Medal of Honor some almost 60 years after his actions in Vietnam. We want to welcome to Veterans Radio today Command Sergeant Major Terry P. Richardson, retired from the U.S. Army, a recent Medal of Honor recipient for his heroic action in Vietnam. Terry, welcome to Veterans Radio.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, this is this is long-delayed recognition, probably recognition you certainly never saw and never thought would come. But before we even get into what happened when you were a 20-year-old in September of 1968, I want to talk a little bit about sort of growing up before you get drafted, and then you come back and life afterwards for 60 years or so. So you grew up in Cass City, Michigan. You came from a family of 13 children. Your father had a gas station, as I understand it, and the family had a farm growing up. You were kind of the typical Midwestern Michigan kid who played basketball, football, baseball, anything probably to get you out of the schoolroom. So tell us a little bit about growing up in Tuscola County, Michigan.
Okay. The first thing is somehow the Pentagon got that mixed up about me being raised in Cass City. I was born in Cass City, Michigan, which is in Tuscola County, but I grew up in a small town in Fairgrove, Michigan. And Fairgrove is in Tuscola County, and we were the Navy bean capital of the world, so there was a lot of small 80-acre farms in that area too. So.
Well, it's good to correct that. The Pentagon, as we all know, isn't always right, and they probably couldn't find Fairgrove on the map. So they just left it at Cass City, I suppose.
Yeah, just left it at Tuscola County.
Yeah, exactly. So, as I said, you grown up doing all the normal stuff of a kid at that age, and did you, that was the time when the draft was prevalent. Kind of everybody knew they might go. How did you and the family approach that?
Well, I graduated from high school in 1966, and I was still kind of working for my dad. I knew I was going to get drafted, so I had opportunities. I could work for General Motors or different places like that, but I didn't mind going to the military, but I didn't want to go for 3 years. So I had went Carroll, Michigan, which was our county seat, about 10 miles from my home. I went over to Carroll one day, and I went to the draft board, and I talked to the lady that was running it. Her name was Lila DeBoer. And I asked her if she knew when I was going to get drafted. And she said no, but she said there's a good chance it'll be sometime this summer. And she said, one thing I can tell you, you'll be going to Fort Knox, Kentucky for your basic training. And she said, you don't want to go down there in August or September because it can be hotter in Wixon. So she said, you can volunteer for the draft. And I thought she meant I could sign up for 3 years. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. I said, I only want to go for 2. And she said, well, you would. Just volunteer. And then I probably did this, like, say, in February or something. Well, it was in... I got my notice, and I got drafted in May of '67. And there was 3 of us that left that day. And in fact, I just seen one of the guys I got drafted with, Harold Sy. I seen him yesterday at a function that they had here in Carroll at our church for me.
Well, and again, in a small town in particular, you're going to know some of the guys you go over with, and everybody in town is going to know that you're serving. It's a lot different. It's a lot different today. You go down, you do your training, you get sent off to Vietnam, and by September of 1968, you're in this reconnaissance mission where the unit gets overwhelmed. You end up saving wounded soldiers, directing airstrikes up on Hill 222. You get shot by a sniper. I mean, there's a whole story there that I'll add into the program later. But you then get out. You then get discharged, and life has to go on, doesn't it?
Yeah, it did. And, that's one thing I was pretty thankful. Growing up in the thumb, like you just said previously, everybody knows everybody. I was really treated really well when I come home. I never had any problems. Just life went on, just like I was gone for 2 years and I come back and everybody was happy to see me, and that's kind of how things went back then.
Well, and you get out in 1969, and this is interesting to me, and I think it would be to our veteran radio listeners. We're talking to Command Sgt. Major Terry Richardson, who received the Medal of Honor from President Trump in March of 2026, and we're going to talk about that a bit. But what's interesting, Terry, is 10 years later, about 1978, you decide to join the Michigan National Guard. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I mentioned earlier that we were the bean capital of the world, Fairgrove it was, and they have a Labor Day celebration every year. Myself and one of my best friends, we were at the Labor Day functions, and lo and behold, here was a guy recruiting, and he looked at us, and he assumed we were both been in the military. He asked us if we were interested in joining the National Guard. And I said, only if you're recruiting for an infantry soldier. And I kind of said it jokingly, and he started to smile, and he said, actually, I am. So it was a thing where it was just a try one year. And I always did. I missed the camaraderie. I always loved being around soldiers. So I joined in. I went back. I joined the Bravo Company, first to the 125 Infantry in Saginaw, Michigan. And I was lucky. They brought me back at the same rank that I was discharged. So I was a staff sergeant when I got in the National Guard. And I went on there. That was Labor Day weekend of 1978, and I retired 29 and a half years later. On January 31st, 2008, I was the Post Sergeant Major up at Camp Grayling. And in that time period, I served in the Bravo Company. I was a squad leader, then a platoon sergeant. And then I ended up being the first sergeant there. I was selected as a battalion sergeant major of the 1st of the 125 Infantry. We were located in Flint. And then I went to the Sergeant Major's Academy in that time period, which was a 6-month school out in El Paso, Texas. After that, I came back with the 125 for a while. Then there was an opening up in northern Michigan. They were looking, it was a battalion, it was called the ISU, it was a support battalion that actually ran Camp Grayling.
And we should mention Camp Grayling is a large joint service training ground up in Michigan, very, very active, very widely used.
Yeah. In Camp Grayling, I just found out the other day, it used to be 156,000 acres. I was told just last Thursday that it's now they got 160,000 acres, and it's the largest military training site east of the Mississippi River.
Yeah.
So it's a huge, huge complex.
Well, being the post Command Sergeant Major was a big deal, is what I'm trying to get across to people here. And you stayed in for essentially 30 years. Obviously, the camaraderie, the men, the women, there was a real connection there for you.
Oh, yeah, like I said, I always loved being around anybody in uniform. Didn't matter if you were Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines. I just liked being around people that like to serve their country.
Now, you retired in 2008, so your military career is over. And somewhere along the line, because your Medal of Honor ceremony is 18 years later, 2026, and somewhere along the line, somebody is advancing a package for your heroics on September 14th, 1968 in Vietnam. That's not something the recipient does. Tell us about, how does this thing keep rolling along, 5 decades later?
Well, what had happened is after the action in September of 68, I was put in and I received a Silver Star. And in Veterans Day of 2000, there was 6 of us that got together at the mall in Washington, D.C. We were all, from Alpha Company First 28. It was kind of like our first reunion. And one of the people that was there was my old company commander. And he always felt guilty. He said, I wish I would have put you in for a higher award. And I was tickled to death just to have a Silver Star. That was a big deal to me. And they were talking, and they wanted to put me in for a higher award. Well, by that time, as you stated, I was a member of the Michigan National Guard. And I said, no, I'd rather you don't, because I said, I'm still serving the country. And what I didn't want something to go, I never dreamed it would be a Medal of Honor. I thought possibly Distinguished Service Cross at the most. But I didn't want them to put me in for that while I was still in uniform, because I didn't ever want to be in a position where somebody would be able to say, yeah, they let Richardson's company do this or Richardson's battalion do that because he has a higher award. So how it happened, like I said, I retired in January of 2008, and my old company commander, and there was 4 other guys that I served with in Vietnam, were at my retirement party. And when they left the party that day, they went to Traverse City, Michigan, and then one of them was flying. One was going to New York, one was going to Illinois, and one to Missouri. And they got talking on the way to the airport, and they decided, now that he's retired, let's go ahead and see if we can put it in. So that's what took so long. They waited till I was retired, and then you have to have, I think I'm correct on this, you have to have 6 eyewitnesses. And then what took along so much time after that, there was so many people in the chain of command that had passed. That's what took so long, because everything had to be verified. And but I never in a million years did I ever thought that I would end up receiving the Medal of Honor.
It is a rigorous process. It's amazing that many years later enough eyewitnesses and command signatures could be gathered, and that the review through the Army has to review it, the Secretary of Defense ultimately making its way to the President's desk. So you get a call, I think it's February of 2026, and first it's a staffer who calls you and sort of says, hey, you're going to be around. Tell us how this unfolds for a guy who's just minding his own business up in the thumb.
Yeah, well, when I first found out about it, it was October 21st of last year. We had I had just taken my wife for a doctor's visit, and we were on our way back up north, And I was on the highway, and the phone rings, and I just see right on my phone, it said Washington, D.C. And I said, I better take this call.
Yeah, they finally caught up to you, Sergeant. They're pulling back something you retired with, right?
Yeah. So I took the call, and that's when they told me that it had left the Secretary of War's office, and it was headed to the President. And to be honest with you, I almost went right in the ditch right there. I couldn't believe it. And then, but the thing that caught me off guard, they told me, it's not official, but you can't tell nobody. That was what really was unbelievable to me. So between that time and February the 2nd, I'd been working with G1 staff out of the Pentagon, and then the protocol people that were, working with me on how to do things the right way. And it was on the morning of February the 2nd, I got a call, and they said, are you going to be around tonight about 6 o'clock? And I said, yeah, I'll be here. I assumed it was going to be like maybe a general or a colonel or somebody wanted to talk to me. The phone rings. The lady, she said, is this Command Sgt Major retired Terry Richardson? And I said, yeah. She said, good. She said, I'll be switching you over. You will be talking to the President of the United States. And that time I almost did fall out of my chair. And he started talking, and just really a caring person. He told me, he said, I don't normally talk to all the people, but he said, when I read your story, and when he said story, that kind of caught me off guard, because anybody in the military knows that it's citation. But he said, what you did, he said, I would never be able to do. And I thought, wow, I just can't believe he's telling me that. But he wanted to know how I grew up, how big of a family I had. Really asked a lot of questions and was very, very gracious. And he had told me then, he said, I signed everything, and he said, you'll be hearing from my people. But they still hadn't set up the date of March 2nd yet. But we probably talked for like 15 minutes, and it was a wonderful experience.
Oh, absolutely, and it should be, for this kind of honor, the nation's highest military award should be, leave the recipient with that, gosh, shucks, that was wonderful call. And I want to interject, again, this is so many years after 1968. You were married for 49 years, and your first wife had passed in May of 2020. So she didn't hear this story, to use that term, wasn't alive to experience the White House ceremony, but through, the goodness of God, you and I talked about this a little earlier, you met your second wife, who actually, Betty, you knew in high school, dated a little bit, hadn't seen each other for, decades and decades and decades, and she had lost her husband. And in an amazing love story, the two of you got married in July of 2023, making you an instant dad and granddad to a bunch of Betty's kids. She was able to experience this. Tell us a little bit about, because every Medal of Honor recipient I've spoken to has a different story and a personal story to tell about the White House visit and the ceremony, the stuff we don't see from the cameras, the behind the screen, if you will. Tell us about that experience for your family.
Well, Betty was very, I can't believe how helpful she was. She was a librarian formerly, and also her husband was a Navy veteran too. But I'm not the most tech-savvy guy in the world, and some of the stuff that we had to do, like I had to do a bio, but it's not the way you would do a normal military bio. It was more like what they want on the civilian side. So she did help me with that. And then I have a son-in-law, Jamie LeBlanc. He's really good with computers and phones and all that kind of stuff. Can you imagine a 78-year-old guy trying to send an encrypted message on your laptop? We actually had, he had us on FaceTime. Here, we were in Florida, and he's in Michigan, and we're doing a FaceTime thing over the phone, and he showed me the right buttons to push so I could send secure messages to the Pentagon. I mean, I had a lot of help, believe me, on all that technical stuff.
Oh, it takes a whole a group of people to get you through this, and then when they bring you to Washington, and before they do that, they're working on your uniform and your medals and everything like that. When you get into Washington, D.C., tell us about the experience.
Well, you're not going to believe this. We had an 8-hour layover of all places in Tampa, Florida. You would think if you're going to have an 8-hour layover in the airport, you're going to be in Minnesota or Michigan or someplace where you get a lot of snow, but we had mechanical problems getting us there. But once we got to Washington on the 28th of February, and that is when everything started to dawn on me. Holy cow. We left the airport, and I couldn't believe it. We got into a vehicle. We had police escort. There was enough police cars and people. I mean, we were going 60 miles an hour out that right through town. We made it from Reagan Airport to the hotel we were staying in about 10 minutes. I mean, it was just phenomenal, the way they did it. And then the first day would have been the 1st of March. That was when they call it Media Day. That's where we did different interviews with different newspapers and TV stations and stuff like that. And then the next day, when we went to the White House for the presentation, that was really special. They had a person that worked there, and you got to imagine now, too, on Saturday, the 28th of February, is the day the war in Iran started. So here we are on the first, and we honestly did not even know anything was going on until the night of March the 1st. We were so busy and nobody mentioned anything. But we had the media day, and then they had a really nice reception that night for all 3 of the recipients. I was the only living recipient, and then the other 2 were posthumous recipients. Their families received the award, but we had a thing up on the top floor of the hotel we were staying, and we found out the next day that there was so much like military brass, like 2-star generals and 3 stars. I think there was 25, if I remember right, 25 Command Sgt Majors.
Wow.
That were brigade level or higher that were there that night. I was unbelievable.
Well, this is an important point, Terry. I want to make this point because you just brought it up. The Medal of Honor is not only important to the individual and his family that receive it. It's important to their communities. It's important to the community of Command Sergeant Majors. It's important to the communities in Tuscola County, for example. It really rings out to all of those folks, and you've probably felt that. You felt it from all the Command Sergeant Majors who showed up.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and it's just it's an honor. I mean, it's something I never thought would ever happen ever to me.
Now, what was it like to actually go through the ceremony and meet the president?
The morning on Monday morning, March the 2nd, the day that I was presented with the Medal of Honor, the president met with we had 15 minutes to a half an hour each family met him personally. The first family that went in was the Redmond family. Their dad was the World War II POW that saved 105 people in a prisoner of war camp. And I was actually, me and my wife were actually able to stand outside of the room. And we kind of could see him, the president, talking to their family. And it was amazing how he bonded with the younger kids. It would have been great-grandchildren or great-great-grandchildren of Master Sergeant Edmonds. But then we went in with the president, and when we talked to him, they had a lot of photos and stuff like that. And then when I was standing right over his left shoulder when he signed my Medal of Honor certificate, and he turned around, had the biggest smile on his face, and he handed me the Sharpie that he signed it with. I mean, that was just amazing. But
and how many friends and family members were you able to have present?
We had, believe it or not, we had 42 people of family and friends that were there. And like I said earlier, we weren't supposed to tell anybody. So could you imagine going to a relative and said, I need your social security number and phone number, but I can't tell you why.
Yeah, you had to get them security clearances to get in the White House.
Everybody has to be vetted, and that's quite a procedure.
Well, that's when you find out where the black sheep in the family are, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, this is you've been wearing the award now only for a few months. And so this maybe hasn't all sunk in yet, but can you talk to the veteran radio listeners a little bit? Command Sergeant Major Terry Richardson, recent Medal of Honor recipient. How does it feel? How do you feel it's changed how you are looked at, how you have to behave, how you have to project out to the rest of the world?
Well, it's like I said, it's an awesome honor to have, to bestowed on you. But I tell everybody, I'm still Terry. I know I'm not a better person or a bigger person than I ever was. And I never feel like the Medal of Honor I'm just a representative of that. I'm carrying that for my platoon and my company in the 1st Infantry Division. And I'm just, like I said, I'm the representative of that. But it is an honor to be able to go out and talk to people and explain to them different things. And like you said, we've done a lot of, we've been back to Washington twice since then. We've been to Fort Riley, Kansas, been to Minneapolis, St. Paul, the DAV State Convention in Traverse City. I've done numerous phone interviews and newspaper interviews. I mean, it seems I've learned that there's times you actually have to say no because, especially when you get older, you just can't keep going day after day after day. And that's one of the things the Medal of Honor Society they were right up front. They said you just only do as much as you want to do, and if you don't want to do anything, you don't have to. So, but I'm trying to give back as much as I possibly can because I think it's important, especially for our younger kids and that to
absolutely
understand things. And no matter who you are, you can do anything you want. That's the nice thing about living in a free country.
Absolutely, and I make all these notes ahead of time, and I got to go check them always because I know I get carried away on stuff. And why it's important for the younger folks, in my view, is, hey, here's a guy from a big family in rural Michigan working on a farm and a gas station. He comes back, and in civilian life, I believe he worked in commercial construction and natural gas sectors. Yeah. Devoted yourself to the National Guard, which so many people have access to. we want the younger folks to relate and realize, I'll say this humbly, you're a regular guy, Terry, and they know people like you, these young kids. And so getting to know you better so that they can relate hopefully instills a little patriotism into them and instills, hey, maybe I have a civic duty, because you clearly, through your National Guard service, recognize that civic duty.
Yep, you're right.
Well,
it does make you feel good too. Like when I'll give you an example. We were in Palm Beach, Florida at the Barrett Jackson auction, and that's General Motors that donated. They called it a squad carrier, and there was 4 recipients there that day, the day that they auctioned the vehicle off, and Rick Hendricks from Hendricks Motors bought it, and ended up, he paid $1 million for that vehicle.
Wow.
And all the money was donated back to the Medal of Honor Society to do things to better our country. But that day when we were there, we were signing a bunch of different things and that for the possible people who were going to be bidding on the car, or on the vehicle. And there was 2 little boys that were standing there, and they were probably maybe 4 and 6 or 4 and 7, something like that. My wife had seen them, and she said, would you boys like to get your picture taken? And man, they were just all pumped up.
Yeah.
And those are the things that make you feel good, So, just take the time, be gracious, and try to do the right thing. That's what I've always been that way, but I try to even be more so now.
Well, Command Sgt. Major Terry Richardson of the U.S. Army and the Michigan National Guard, we certainly appreciate the time that you've been gracious with us today. We had a little technical difficulty at the start, but we got that all sorted out. So we look forward to seeing you and Betty down at the Congressional Medal of Honor Society Convention in Detroit in late September 2026. And again, thank you for taking time with us today.
I'm happy to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. As we've often said, these men who have earned the Medal of Honor really turn out to be just pretty straightforward, humble guys, like your neighbors, like your uncle. One of their stories is always sort of inspiring because it shows in a given moment you have the opportunity to reach beyond your normal self and do something heroic for other people. So keep that in mind as you listen to a few words from our sponsors, and then our next interview, yes, we're talking testosterone, low T.
Military veterans touch everyone's life. I'm guessing right now you're thinking of a veteran, a close friend, relative. Maybe it's you. Even the toughest of us sometimes need help, but don't know where to turn for support. You don't need special training to help a veteran in your life. We can all help someone going through a difficult time. Learn how you can be there for veterans. Visit veteranscrisisline.net. Veteranscrisisline.net. A message from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs.
If you have a VA claim denied by the Board of Veterans Appeals, contact Legal Help for Veterans at 1-800-693-4800. They're experts in handling cases before the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. Their number again, 1-800-693-4800.
Welcome to Veterans Radio. I never thought I'd have a talk about low T, but leave it to the Secretary, Pete Hegseth, to bring this issue to the forefront, which had me go out and find a medical doctor who would talk about testosterone. Yes, I never thought I'd have this discussion. We want to welcome to Veterans Radio Dr. Robert Kelsch. Doctor, welcome to Veterans Radio.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Well, it's one of those things where sometimes there's something in the news you just have to talk to your veteran radio listeners about. This is certainly one of them. In the last week or so, the Secretary Hegseth did a video and said that yep, he's going to have mandatory testing for soldiers over 30 to be screened for testosterone deficiency. Now, I went and looked for, okay, there must be a written plan for this. At the moment, there's nothing but this video statement. Nothing defines what testosterone deficiency is, or are we just talking soldiers? Are we talking airmen? Are we talking guys in the Navy? Who are we talking about this? And what the hell is testosterone deficiency? So that brings us back to the good Dr. Kelsch, who's willing to humor me on this. He did his undergraduate at Wayne State University. He did his medical school at the University of Michigan. His academic activities for a long time, decades, was relative to the brain and the reproductive system. That caused him to intersect with the whole issue of hormone deficiency. After a while, he got elevated into administrative roles. He's held a number of those, including Executive Vice President for Medical Affairs at the University of Michigan Health System. He was also the Vice President of Health Affairs at the University of Iowa. Very accomplished. Bob, we're not going to get into all of it, but when you read this article and you and I bumped into each other, you said, I got to tell you about this. So that's where we're at. I don't even know where to start with this pronouncement, this video pronouncement of we're going to test our war fighters to ensuring you have the right testosterone levels to operate at your absolute best.
Right.
Okay, let's start with this. What does testosterone really do?
Well, testosterone is the major male hormone, not the only one, secreted by the testis. And it gets into our bloodstream and it helps us build muscle mass. It makes us more aggressive, more masculine. It helps us develop our reproductive parts of our body so that they can function so that we can reproduce. So it is a very, very important hormone, and it leads to, feeling stronger and masculine behavior, hair growth, facial hair growth, etc.
Does everybody have the same level of testosterone as their normal baseline?
Absolutely not. By the way, both genders have testosterone and both genders have estradiol. Those are the two major sex hormones. There are other hormones, but I won't try to make it too complicated.
Don't make this a medical lecture. Remember, you're talking to veterans, grunts. Right. You were in the Navy Reserve, issued out as a lieutenant colonel. Your son did 6.5 years in the Navy. He was on the USS Iowa when it had that explosion. So you know veterans, you know military guys. So don't give us the medical lecture. Explain it to us like we're as dumb as we are.
Okay, well, maybe I would like to just start, if you give me a second, to say that this video clip, which I saw on television, really upset me. It upset me because it was making me worry about blurring good medical therapy for someone who needs something with optimization of performance in an artificial way. And I think that's the downside of this mandatory, quote, ruling or proclamation. And it's the mandatory aspect that bothers me the most. But let me tell you a little bit about testosterone measurement. First of all, when we are a little baby boy, you actually have a high testosterone when you're born. It goes way down to almost nothing after the first few months of life. And then it resurges during adolescence, first during the evening while you're sleeping. And then it reaches its peak, usually between late teens and late 20s. And after that, after age 30, your average level of testosterone goes down about 1% per year for all of us. So as we get older, we're just not as vigorous in a masculine sense as we were when we were 25. So that's the normal pattern. The levels of testosterone in your blood do vary throughout the day. So the time of day that you measure it is important. If I'm taking care of a patient, I would want to measure the testosterone in the morning and then repeat it again maybe a week later because it varies. And without too low measurements, I wouldn't even consider treatment. Now, what's low? It depends on how the laboratory reports the level. It either reports it as 3 to 10 or 300 to 1,000. And I won't go into the units because that's kind of confusing. So if 3 is the lowest level, there's still several percent of people that are still normal, but they're a little bit less than 3. And if it's 10, there's still a few percentage above 10. So ranges only cover usually 95 to 97% of people. But if it were persistently below 3, and if the patient coming to me said, well, I'm feeling tired, I'm feeling down, I'm not sleeping well, whatever, if he had symptoms, if you were having difficulty really enjoying sexual activity, all those things would make me worry that maybe something is going on. And then we'd spend a lot of time talking about his lifestyle, because it's usually lifestyle changes that lead to low T, borderline low T. I'm not talking about a severe patient who might come in and have almost immeasurable T. Those are the sort of patients that I would go right ahead to put them on testosterone replacement therapy. But many, many things can cause a, quote, borderline low testosterone level, especially if you're only measuring it on one occasion, especially if you're not measuring it in the morning.
And I've done some reading that one of the things that impacts testosterone may lead to a lower T number is stress. Is that right?
Absolutely. Stress, chronic stress will decrease sexual performance in both genders. In women, it often leads to loss of menstrual periods. In men, it's just a slow compounding effect of how stress hormones, which come from the adrenal gland, interact with reproductive hormones, and you shut down your reproductive capacity somewhat.
There's actually something in the literature, we've bumped into this in our practice about veteran disability operator stress, that those who have been deployed and on a heavy tempo in combat, maybe they're special operators, they have such a load of stress that it leads to various things, and I'm taking it can lead to low T among other things.
Yes, any type of severe stress, and certainly that would be regarded as very severe stress. And you wouldn't want to then I would want the service to help take away the stress and let nature bring it back up, rather than try to enhance performance and make someone perhaps overly aggressive and not as rational.
And still in a stressful situation.
Right.
Yeah. If you have, and we don't know how this program's supposed to work, there was something about, testing is mandatory, but treatment is not. Give me your reaction to that kind of thinking.
Well, that really worried me a great deal, because the treatment decision should be between the soldier, or the patient in this case, from my perspective, and the doctor. And you shouldn't go into the testing thinking that you need treatment, because, for example, someone who's a little bit overweight and has sleep apnea would be much better handled by recognizing that the sleep apnea and the stress and the sleep deprivation are causing the low T. So you go for the root cause rather than trying to treat a lab result, which is the result of something else.
It makes total sense. And one of the other things I'm thinking about is who's having this mandatory testing, because when you go and check, only about 20% of the Army really constitutes combat forces, and only about 60% of the Navy does, and 33% of the Marines do. And some of this is function of size, right? Army's big, so it has a smaller percentage. But in any event, it's not every soldier, sailor, or Marine that is as Seth likes to say, war fighter, age 30 and above. Does this turn into some sort of competition? I mean, have you had patients go, "Oh, I want my T level higher"?
Well, that's exactly one of my fears. You're saying it better than I could have. I fear that once I'm going to say young men. I don't mean this in a sexist way, I guess. But young men tend to be competitive. I was very competitive, especially at that age. And if you know it's mandatory and you're all on the line, like I had to do when I was going through my military exams, you're always competitive. And then you're going to ask the guy, well, what was your T? Oh, well, mine was 3.2. Only 3.2? You ought to get treated. I
Right.
think that's exactly the sort of behavior that I really worry about.
Dr. Kelsch, help us understand, too, what is this treatment? How does one treat for this? And I don't know how that works in the field and all of that. Give us some medical guidance here.
Okay, testosterone is a type of hormone. I won't go into the details, but it's a hormone that is comes from cholesterol. All sex hormones are types of steroids. Stress hormones are a type of steroids. So testosterone, in order to be treated, to be effective, has to get into your bloodstream. And the usual pills that we use for many decades were kind of dangerous because they went through your intestinal tract and then they immediately go to the liver, which had a high rate of liver problems. So we don't use those anymore. So we're left with finding a way to get testosterone into your bloodstream and avoiding the liver. The ways you do that are by giving injections. You can use a nasal gel and rub it on various parts of your body. You can use a nasal gel and put it in your nose about 6 times a day if you want to go through that trouble. Or you can use a patch, which would be visible somewhere because it'll be a pretty sizable patch. And that they all have problems. The gels have the problem that if, let's say you were putting it in your nose and it comes on your cheek and your wife starts kissing you, you're going to pass testosterone over to her. The skin patches cause irritation. The injections are very inexpensive, very effective, but they give you a sudden burst and they don't smooth things out very well. So a lot of people don't like the fact that a couple days after the injection, they're really jacked up. I can't think of a better term.
Right.
And then it smooths out, and then 2 weeks later, they're down again. So you got to get the injection every.
Yeah, is this something you have to do like every day, every week, every month, once a year? What's the?
No, if you start giving a normal person a testosterone regimen, you might give them something like 100 milligrams every 2 weeks intramuscularly. And actually, my patients, I would show them how to do it, and they could do it themselves, either they or their partner. But these are people that had no testicular function, okay? And they could live a very good life that way. Once you start giving testosterone to a normal person, it shuts down their own testosterone production.
Oh, great.
Okay, so the testosterone gets into the bloodstream, feeds back onto your brain, makes you more aggressive, lifts your spirits up perhaps, but it shuts down your own hormones that go down to the testes to make it work. So your testes get a little bit smaller, and you're then tempted to increase the dosage even above the average dosage. And so you become testosterone dependent, even though you're normal.
And when you stop, what happens? I do this for a year or two,
Yeah.
The next administration says this is crazy. We're not paying for testosterone replacement therapy. What happens?
Well, there is a shutting down of the system, but it usually comes back. but it'll come back probably at a lower level because you're older and because it's naturally going down anyways. And then you're back to where you started. And if you have a different root cause for the low T, you still haven't handled anything.
It was an interesting discussion with Dr. Kelsch. It goes on a little longer. We don't have time for it here. You can pick it up on our podcast, which you can get from any of your standard providers, Spotify, YouTube, Apple, etc. So go listen to the rest of that if you'd like. Dr. Kelsch's opinion on this Secretary Access proposal is pretty damn clear. You know how he feels about it. So that's good to know. I want to tell you about Radio on the River. Go to veteransradio.org. Check out our upcoming fundraiser. It's the only one of the year. You can donate online. We really need your support to keep this going. We're into our 24th year. We're the second oldest veterans radio program in the nation. We've got some exciting things coming up, including some activity on national exposure on PBS. So we can only do that with your donor support, and we really would appreciate if you would do that. You can also find us on Facebook, naturally. We've got a pretty active site there. If you have comments or have suggestions as who we might talk to on Veterans Radio, whether they be Medal of Honor recipients or doctors on crazy ideas, feel free to send them along to Dale@veteransradio.org or Jim@veteransradio.org. And again, check us out on the website. Help us out on the website with a donation. We'd really appreciate that. And until next time on Veterans Radio, you are dismissed.